Step away from the motorcycle now! Hands on your head!
Officer, this is my driveway. That bike is registered to me.
Don't argue with me. You're stripping stolen property.
You're wrong. My ID is in my pocket. The registration is on.
Hands on your head or you're getting tased!
I'm a retired U.S. Marine.
Officer Derek Vance had been patrolling the streets of suburban Charlotte for 6 years when he made the decision that would cost his department $1.4 million and end his career in disgrace. He was 29 years old, a man who walked with the swagger of someone who believed the badge granted him not just authority, but immunity. He was known in the precinct as a charger, an officer who moved fast, made quick decisions, and worried about the paperwork later. His supervisors called him proactive. The community called him a problem. On a bright Tuesday morning in May, under the clear blue sky of a quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac, Vance received a dispatch call about a suspicious subject, possibly stripping a motorcycle in a residential driveway. The subject was described as a black male large build wearing a tank top. Vance's mind immediately painted a picture. He didn't see a homeowner. He didn't see a mechanic. He saw a thief. He saw a criminal element invading a neighborhood where he decided they didn't belong. What Vance failed to realize, what his bias prevented him from seeing, was that he was about to draw his service weapon on Master Sergeant Marcus Holloway, a retired United States Marine with 20 years of decorated service. Holloway wasn't a thief. He was a homeowner, a taxpayer, and a man who had led platoons through the deserts of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan. He had survived IED's ambushes and the grueling politics of the Corps, only to find himself staring down the barrel of a Glock 17 held by a man young enough to be his son, right there on his own manicured lawn. Before we get into the details of this catastrophic failure of judgment, tell me, where are you watching from today? If you believe that a man's home is his castle, and that badge implies service, not tyranny, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We bring you these stories because the truth often gets buried in the police reports, and we are here to dig it out. The neighborhood of Oak Creek is the kind of place people move to when they want peace. It is a collection of brick colonials and sprawling ranchers with lawns cut to military precision and American flags hanging from front porches. It was 10:30 a.m. The sun was high, casting long, sharp shadows across the concrete. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and jasmine. It was quiet save for the rhythmic ratcheting sound coming from the driveway of number 42. Master Sergeant Marcus Holloway, 58 years old, was exactly where he wanted to be. After 2 decades of waking up at 0400, after years of sleeping in the dirt and eating MREs, he had earned his peace. He was a man of routine and discipline. Even in retirement, he kept his hair high and tight, his face clean-shaven, and his garage organized with the same rigor as an armory. Marcus was working on his pride and joy, a 1968 Harley-Davidson FLH Electra Glide. He had bought the bike as a wreck 3 years ago, a rusted heap of metal that most would have scrapped. But Marcus saw the potential. He had spent hundreds of hours sourcing original parts, polishing chrome, and rebuilding the engine block by block. This wasn't just a motorcycle. It was his therapy. It was the thing that kept his hands busy when his mind wanted to drift back to Fallujah. He was wearing a grease-stained white undershirt and old cargo pants, his muscular arms slick with sweat and oil. At 58, he was still built like a bunker, broad shoulders, thick chest, and a stillness about him that commanded respect without him having to say a word. He had the bike up on a lift in the center of his driveway to catch the morning light. The saddlebags removed the engine casing open. To anyone with a lick of common sense, he looked like a man fixing a vehicle. The tools were laid out on a portable bench. The service manual was open. The radio was playing classic rock at a respectful volume. But common sense was in short supply that morning. 2 doors down in the house, with the blinds always drawn, lived Silas Thorne. Thorne was new to the neighborhood, a 35-year-old software sales rep who spent more time on neighborhood watch forums than he did getting to know his neighbors. He was the type of man who viewed the world through a lens of constant paranoia, convinced that crime was always creeping up his driveway. Thorne didn't know Marcus. He hadn't bothered to introduce himself when he moved in 3 months ago. All he saw through the slats of his blinds was a large black man he didn't recognize taking apart a motorcycle. He didn't see the tools. He didn't see the care. He saw stripping for parts. He watched for 5 minutes, his heart rate climbing for no reason other than his own prejudice. "He's taking the bags off," Thorne muttered to himself, peering through the window. "He's gutting it right there in broad daylight. The nerve of these people." Thorne grabbed his phone. He didn't walk outside to ask, "Hey, neighbor, need a hand?" He didn't look for a house key in the man's pocket. He dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? Yes. I need police at 42 Oak Creek Drive immediately. There is a suspicious character in the driveway. He's stripping a motorcycle. Is the person armed, sir? He has metal objects, tools. He looks like a thug. He doesn't live here. I've never seen him. He's taking the bike apart right now. You need to hurry before he loads it into a van or something. We have a unit in the area, sir. Stay inside and do not approach. The die was cast. The information relayed to Officer Derek Vance was colored by Thorne's bias. Suspicious subject, stripping a vehicle, possible weapon. Vance, sitting in his patrol car 2 streets over, didn't hear "check on a neighbor." He heard "felony in progress." Officer Derek Vance had a file. It was a thick file, though most of the contents had been glossed over by a system designed to protect its own. In his 6 years with the department, Vance had accumulated 14 complaints. Most were for discourtesy, a polite term for verbal abuse. 3 were for excessive force. All had been dismissed or resulted in minor counseling. His supervisors noted that Vance was aggressive in interdiction, a trait they valued in high crime zones. But Oak Creek wasn't a high crime zone. It was a no-crime zone. Vance believed in intuition. He believed he could spot a criminal by the look in their eyes, the way they stood, the clothes they wore. He called it street smarts. The data called it profiling. When the call came in, Vance didn't think about the logistics of someone stealing a motorcycle by taking it apart in a driveway at 10:30 a.m. He just hit the lights. He turned the corner onto Oak Creek Drive at 40 miles per hour, the engine of his cruiser roaring. He saw the target immediately. 42 Oak Creek, black male, tank top, tools. Vance slammed on the brakes, skidding his cruiser to a halt directly across the bottom of the driveway, blocking the exit. He didn't park like a public servant. He parked like a soldier taking territory. He threw the door open and stepped out, his hand already resting on the grip of his holster. He didn't walk up the driveway. He marched. Marcus looked up from the engine block. He wiped a smudge of grease from his forehead with the back of his hand, squinting against the sun to see the silhouette approaching him. He wasn't alarmed at first. He had friends on the force. He assumed perhaps someone was looking for directions or warning about a loose dog. But then he saw the body language. He saw the tense shoulders, the forward lean, the hand on the gun. Marcus had trained thousands of Marines. He knew the posture of a man looking for a fight. He slowly placed the torque wrench on the workbench, but he didn't raise his hands. He hadn't done anything wrong. "Step away from the bike!" Vance shouted from 30 feet away. Marcus stood up straight, his spine aligning with the discipline of 2 decades. "Good morning, officer. Can I help you?" "I said step away from the bike. Now!" Vance closed the distance, rapidly entering Marcus's personal space. "I am standing next to my vehicle," Marcus said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that carried no fear, only confusion. "What seems to be the problem?" "The problem is you're stripping a bike that doesn't belong to you. Turn around and face the garage door. Hands on your head." Marcus didn't move. He looked Vance dead in the eye. "Officer, you are making a mistake. I live here. This is my home. This is my motorcycle. I am performing maintenance." "I'm not going to ask you again." Vance snapped, unholstering his taser and pointing it at Marcus's chest. The red laser dot danced on the sweat-stained white cotton of his shirt. "Turn around or you're going to ride the lightning." "Do you think officers should be required to verify ownership before escalating to force in non-violent situations? Let us know in the comments below. The air in the driveway seemed to vanish, replaced by a suffocating tension. Marcus Holloway looked at the taser, then back at the officer's face. He saw the dilated pupils, the sweat on the upper lip, the trembling finger on the trigger. He realized with a sinking feeling that reason was not invited to this conversation. "Officer," Marcus said, speaking slowly and clearly, enunciating every syllable. "My identification is in my back pocket. The registration for this motorcycle is sitting right there on that workbench next to the manual. If you look, you will see my name, Marcus Holloway, on both." "I said hands on your head!" Vance screamed, his voice cracking. He was losing control of the situation because the suspect wasn't acting like a suspect. The suspect was acting like a superior officer. "You're resisting. Do it now." "I am not resisting," Marcus said, keeping his hands visible but down at his sides. "I am explaining. I have a torn rotator cuff in my left shoulder from service. I cannot put my hands behind my head without significant pain. I am happy to turn around, but I will not put my hands on my head." "Service," Vance scoffed. "Yeah, I bet. Probably served time at state." That was the line. That was the moment the disrespect shifted from professional to personal. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had lost friends in the sandbox. He had carried brothers in arms into medevac choppers while taking fire, and this child with a badge was dismissing it as prison time. "I am a Master Sergeant, retired United States Marine Corps," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous in its calmness. "And you are currently trespassing on my property and threatening a law-abiding citizen with a weapon. I strongly suggest you check that registration paper." Vance didn't look at the paper. He didn't look at the house. He didn't look at the manicured lawn that screamed pride of ownership. He only saw a challenge to his authority. "That's it," Vance growled. He holstered the taser and lunged forward. He grabbed Marcus's left arm, the bad shoulder, and wrenched it behind his back with maximum force. Marcus grunted a sharp intake of breath as white-hot pain shot through his shoulder joint. Instinct screamed at him to fight back. He knew 12 different ways to disarm this man and put him on the concrete in under 3 seconds. But Marcus also knew what happened to black men who fought back against police. He knew the headline wouldn't read, "Marine defends himself." It would read, "Violent suspect attacks officer." So he froze. He allowed Vance to twist the injured arm. He allowed the smaller man to slam him against the side of his own garage. "Stop fighting. Stop resisting," Vance yelled for the benefit of the body camera, even though Marcus was standing perfectly still. "I am not resisting." Marcus gritted out through clenched teeth, the pain in his shoulder making his vision swim. "You are injuring a disabled veteran. I am telling you my shoulder is surgically reconstructed." "Shut up!" Vance kicked Marcus's legs apart, forcing him to spread his stance wide. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. By now the commotion had drawn an audience. The neighbors, the ones who actually knew Marcus, were coming out. Mrs. Gable, a 60-year-old retired school teacher from across the street, was standing on her porch, horrified. "What are you doing?" she screamed. "That's Marcus. He lives there." Vance ignored her. He slapped the cuff on Marcus's left wrist and then yanked the right arm back to meet it. He ratcheted the cuffs down tight, far tighter than necessary, the metal biting into the bone. "You're making a mistake, son," Marcus whispered, his face pressed against the aluminum siding of his garage. "A career-ending mistake. The only mistake was you thinking you could strip a bike in my town." Vance panted, adrenaline flooding his system. He spun Marcus around. "You're under arrest for grand theft auto, resisting arrest, and failure to comply." "Grand theft of my own property," Marcus said, staring straight into Vance's eyes. Silas Thorne, the neighbor who had called, was peeking through his blinds, watching the arrest. He felt a surge of vindication. "See," he thought. "I was right. The police got him." Vance marched Marcus down the driveway toward the cruiser. He shoved him toward the back door. Marcus, still measuring every word, looked directly at Mrs. Gable, who had her phone out and was recording. Mrs. Gable, Marcus said, clearly, his voice booming for the microphone. Please record that, officer. He glanced at the badge. Officer Vance, badge number 492, refused to check the registration on the workbench. He refused to verify my identity. He has injured my shoulder after being warned of a medical condition. I am Master Sergeant Marcus Holloway, and I am being removed from my own home. Get in the car. Vance shoved Marcus's head down and pushed him into the cramped back seat of the cruiser. The door slammed shut. The cage separated Marcus from his home, his bike, and his freedom. He sat awkwardly, leaning to the right to alleviate the pressure on his shoulder. He closed his eyes and began to breathe a tactical breathing exercise he used to steady his aim before a sniper shot. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. He wasn't praying for mercy. He was preparing for war. But this war would be fought in a courtroom, and his weapon would be the truth. Vance jumped into the front seat, heart pounding. He grabbed the radio. Dispatch 1 in custody, 10 to 15. Suspect was combative, transporting to Central. Copy that, Unit 2 Alpha. Tow truck is en route for the vehicle. No, Marcus said from the back seat. Do not tow my bike. It is on a lift. If they try to move it without securing the engine block, they will destroy the transmission. Should have thought of that before you stole it. Vance smirked, putting the car in gear. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Vance played the radio loud, an aggressive rock station trying to drown out the silence from the back seat. He expected the suspect to be pleading cursing or banging on the windows, but Marcus just sat there. He watched the familiar streets pass by his face, a mask of stone. When they arrived at the precinct, Vance pulled into the Sallyport. He hauled Marcus out of the car again, grabbing the bad arm. Marcus flinched but stayed silent. He was walked through the heavy steel doors, past the holding cells, and up to the booking desk. The watch commander on duty was Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 55, a man who had seen it all. He was tired, sipping lukewarm coffee, expecting the usual parade of drunk drivers and shoplifters. When Vance walked in with a man who looked like he could be a recruiting poster for the Marine Corps, Miller frowned. What do we have, Vance? Miller asked, setting his mug down. Grand theft auto, Sarge. Caught him stripping a Harley in a driveway over on Oak Creek. Neighbor called it in. Guy got aggressive, had to go hands-on. Miller looked at Marcus. He saw the gray at the temples, the bearing the specific way Marcus stood even while cuffed. He saw the grease on the hands, but also the expensive watch on the wrist. Name, Miller asked Marcus. Master Sergeant Marcus Holloway, U.S. M.C. retired. Marcus answered. Address 42 Oak Creek Drive, the address where I was arrested. Miller paused. His eyes flicked from Marcus to Vance. You arrested him at 42 Oak Creek. Yeah, Vance said, puffing his chest out. He was taking the bike apart in the driveway, said he lived there, usual story, refused to show ID. I told him my ID was in my pocket, Marcus corrected calmly, and that the registration was on the bench. He refused to check either. Miller stood up. He walked around the desk. Vance, give me his wallet. Vance reached into Marcus's back pocket and pulled out a leather bifold. He handed it to Miller. Miller opened it. He looked at the driver's license. Marcus Holloway, 42 Oak Creek Drive. He looked at the military ID card. Master Sergeant, retired. Miller felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He looked at the computer screen and typed in the license plate Vance had called in for the tow. Vehicle 1968, Harley-Davidson, FLH, registered owner, Marcus Holloway. Status valid. Miller closed his eyes for a second. He took a deep breath. Then he looked at Vance with an expression that wasn't anger. It was pity. Pity for the absolute storm that was about to rain down on them. Vance, Miller said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. You arrested this man for stealing his own motorcycle. What? Vance blinked. No, the neighbor said. I don't give a damn what the neighbor said, Miller roared, slamming his hand on the desk. Did you run the VIN? Did you check the registration? He was resisting. I had to secure the scene. He was fixing his bike, Miller shouted. He turned to Marcus. Sir, I need to get these cuffs off you immediately. Wait, Sarge, Vance protested, stepping forward. He was combative. He refused a lawful order. Shut up, Derek, Miller snapped. Just shut your mouth before you dig this hole any deeper. Miller unlocked the cuffs. Marcus brought his arms forward, slowly grimacing as the blood rushed back into his hands. His wrists were bruised and bleeding where the metal had pinched the skin. He rubbed his left shoulder, rotating it gingerly. I need a medical evaluation for this shoulder, Marcus said quietly. And I want a lieutenant or higher, now. I'm calling the captain, Miller said. He looked at Vance. Go to the break room. Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch your report. Just sit there. Vance stood there for a moment, confused. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a creeping dread. He looked at Marcus, who was no longer a suspect, but a man who held Vance's future in his grease-stained hands. Captain Robert Henderson arrived 20 minutes later. He was a man who hated surprises, and this was the worst kind. He listened to Sergeant Miller, reviewed the booking info, and then watched the body camera footage from Vance's chest. The room was silent as they watched the video on the monitor. They watched Vance scream at a calm man. They heard Marcus identify himself. They heard him offer the registration. They saw Vance escalate, and escalate again. Henderson took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He turned to Marcus, who was sitting in a chair holding an ice pack to his shoulder that a medic had provided. Mr. Holloway, Captain Henderson began. Master Sergeant, Marcus corrected. Master Sergeant Holloway, on behalf of this department, I am incredibly sorry. There has been a grave error. An error is a typo, Captain, Marcus said. This was an assault. This was a violation of my civil rights. This was a man with a badge deciding I didn't belong in my own home. I understand. We are going to release you immediately. We will drive you home. We will stop the tow truck. I want that officer's name and badge number entered into the record, Marcus said. And I want a copy of that video preserved. My lawyer will be contacting you by the end of business day. You have my word, Henderson said. Henderson then turned and walked out of the office straight to the break room where Vance was sitting scrolling on his phone. Stand up, Henderson said. Vance stood up. Cap, listen, the guy was... Badge and gun. On the table. Now. Cap, come on. It was a high-pressure situation. There was no pressure until you brought it, Henderson said, his voice like ice. You arrested a 20-year combat veteran for fixing a vintage Harley in his own driveway. You ignored every procedure we have for verification. You're on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Give me the badge. Vance unpinned the badge. His hands were shaking. For the first time, the arrogance cracked. He looked at the piece of metal that had defined his identity for 6 years. He laid it on the cheap break room table. Get out of my station, Henderson said. The lawsuit was swift, brutal, and public. The video of the arrest recorded by Mrs. Gable hit the internet before Marcus even got home. It went viral within hours. #VeteranArrested trended nationwide. The image of Marcus Holloway, a man who had defended his country being twisted up against his garage wall by a 29-year-old cop, sparked outrage across the political spectrum. The department's internal investigation was concluded in record time. Vance's history of results-oriented policing was exposed for what it was, a pattern of harassment. The thug narrative he tried to spin fell apart when juxtaposed with Marcus's impeccable service record and calm demeanor. The city knew they couldn't win in court. A jury would have destroyed them. They settled for $1.4 million. Officer Derek Vance was fired. But Marcus didn't stop there. He pushed for decertification. Vance's name was added to the National Registry, ensuring he could never wear a badge again in any state. As for Silas Thorne, the neighbor who made the call, he was named in the police report. The internet found him. He lost his job in software sales after the company decided they didn't want a man associated with racially profiling veterans representing their brand. He moved out of Oak Creek 3 months later under the cover of darkness. 6 months after the arrest, Marcus Holloway stood in his driveway. The Harley was finished. The chrome gleamed in the sunlight. The engine purred with that distinctive heavy thrum that only a vintage bike can make. The money was in the bank, but Marcus didn't care about the money. He cared that his shoulder still clicked when the weather changed. He cared that every time a police siren wailed in the distance, his pulse spiked just a little bit. He swung his leg over the bike and settled into the leather seat. He put on his helmet and revved the engine. Mrs. Gable waved from her porch. Marcus nodded back. He had won the battle, but the war had left its mark. He backed the bike out of the driveway past the spot where he had been handcuffed. He rode out of the cul-de-sac, the wind hitting his face, seeking the peace that had been stolen from him. Justice was served, yes. But Marcus Holloway knew the truth. No check could buy back the feeling of safety in your own home. That was gone forever, taken by a man who saw a skin color before he saw a citizen. And that is the tragedy. Not just the arrest, but the theft of peace. If this story moved you, if you believe that we must hold those in power to the highest standard, please leave a comment below. Tell us, do you think settlements are enough, or should officers face personal liability for these actions? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We are going to keep telling these stories until the pattern ends, until every veteran, every homeowner, every citizen is seen for who they are, and not what a biased system assumes them to be. Stay safe, look out for your neighbors, and as always, thank you for watching.